These are tactics, not strategies. Tactics are how you fight battles. Strategies are how you win wars. Here are the battlefield tactics that changed how armies fight. Sniper trap. The sniper intentionally shoots to wound instead of killing an enemy combatant. The goal is drawing more enemy units into the field of fire to engage them as they provide aid. This tactic violates the Geneva Conventions when used against medical personnel marked with the Red Cross or Red Crescent. Modern militaries avoid this because targeting medics is a war crime. The tactic works against non-medical rescuers in situations where enemies value recovering wounded personnel enough to expose themselves. Salvo. This technique fires every cannon simultaneously to surprise and overwhelm the enemy before they can respond. Multiple splashes from simultaneous impacts are more visible than single shots, helping gunners set the firing range. Naval forces used this heavily during World War I and World War II. Cruise missiles and precision-guided munitions have largely replaced massed naval gunfire in modern warfare. Hull-down position. A tank uses the back slope of a hill or natural cover to expose only its turret and gun barrel to the enemy. The hull, which contains the most vulnerable armor, remains hidden. This defensive position works excellently in rolling terrain with good visibility, but fails completely in flat ground forests, swamps, or urban environments. The tank cannot easily transition from defense to attack without exposing its vulnerable underside while climbing uphill. Creeping Barrage. Artillery fire advances gradually ahead of attacking infantry to provide cover and suppress enemy defenses. The barrage moves forward at a fixed rate, typically 100 yards every few minutes. This proved more effective than simply bombarding trenches directly because defenders could replace casualties quickly and barbed wire remained intact after static bombardment. The tactic required dangerous precision between artillery batteries firing miles behind the lines and infantry advancing under fire. Poor coordination led to frequent friendly fire incidents. Artillery observers had no direct communication with infantry commanders during the attack. If infantry moved too slowly, they lost protection and faced enemy machine guns. If they moved too quickly, they walked into their own shells. The French accepted 10% casualties from their own artillery as normal. At the Battle of the Somme in 1916, coordination failures led to British shells killing hundreds of their own soldiers. Blitzkrieg. Germans used this during World War II with rapid, overwhelming force concentration in an arrow-shaped formation. Mechanized infantry and armored units formed the spearhead, supported by artillery and close air support. The goal was breaking through enemy lines rather than attacking them directly, then exploiting deep into enemy territory before defenders could regroup. This strategy continuously changed front lines, unbalancing the enemy. The key was speed and momentum. Panzer divisions would advance 60 miles in a single day, bypassing strong points rather than reducing them. This created chaos in enemy rear areas. The tactic succeeded spectacularly in Poland and France, where firm terrain, short distances, and unprepared enemies allowed rapid victory. It failed catastrophically in Russia, where vast distances, primitive roads, and extreme weather destroyed the mobility the doctrine required. Foxholes. A hole where two infantry soldiers position themselves for cover when enemies are near. Camouflage applied to the opening conceals the position. This technique was created to combat Blitzkrieg by giving infantry protected firing positions. Germans added turrets to their foxholes. Japanese used smaller, better concealed versions that held only one soldier, making them more effective for ambushes than cover. Recon by fire. Firing on likely enemy positions to provoke a response. The goal is confirming enemy presence or absence without exposing reconnaissance troops. This tactic wastes ammunition if enemy forces are not present and can alert enemies to your position even when it succeeds at locating them. Single envelopment. One decoy division attacks the enemy front while another moves to the enemy's flank or rear from the side. The flanking force stops reinforcements, cuts communications, or attacks from behind. This requires the flanking force to move undetected and the frontal force to hold enemy attention without collapsing. Pincer movement. When the enemy launches a frontal assault, the defending center holds position while both wings move outward and strike the enemy's flanks. This forces the attacker to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously and can result in complete encirclement. The center must hold long enough for the wings to complete their maneuver. Oblique order. One part of the army focuses overwhelming force on one enemy flank, while the other part moves obliquely to break through the enemy line through force concentration. This tactic requires precise timing. If the strong flank breaks through too slowly, the weaker flank becomes vulnerable to enemy counterattack. Feigned Retreat. Pretending to retreat to draw the enemy into a vulnerable position. This frequently turns into a real retreat because undisciplined troops lose coherence and actually flee. Successful execution requires extraordinary discipline and often involves days or weeks of apparent withdrawal to convince pursuers the retreat is genuine. The Mongols mastered this tactic under commanders like Subutai and Jebi. At the Battle of Kalka River in 1223, 20,000 Mongols conducted a 9-day fake retreat while harassing 80,000 Russian and Kipchak troops. The Russians pursued for 200 miles, becoming exhausted and strung out. When the Mongols suddenly turned and attacked, they destroyed the Russian army in hours. Mongol success came from absolute discipline enforced through their military structure. If any warrior broke formation, his entire unit of 10 men faced execution. This peer pressure maintained cohesion even during apparent panic. Most medieval European armies could not execute this tactic because once their troops started running, commanders could not stop them from genuinely fleeing. Inverted wedge. The weak center retreats slowly under enemy pressure while the wings push forward to encircle the attacker. Great responsibility is placed on the wings because if they fail to complete the encirclement, the center can be destroyed. This tactic requires the center to retreat at exactly the right pace, neither too fast nor too slow. Crossing the T. A line of warships crosses perpendicular in front of enemy ships. This allows every gun on the crossing ships to target the enemy, while enemy ships can only fire with their forward guns. This naval tactic dominated battleship warfare until aircraft carriers made surface gun battles obsolete. Bounding Overwatch, an alternating movement tactic for advancing under fire. The team splits into two parts. One provides covering fire while the other moves forward. When the moving element reaches its destination, they provide covering fire while the first element advances. This continues until the objective is reached. Ambush. A surprise attack by hidden units waiting for favorable conditions. Ambushes succeed through concealment, timing, and overwhelming local firepower. The ambushing force must break contact and withdraw before enemy reinforcements arrive. Skirmishing. Skirmishers deploy in front of the main force in a spread formation. They harass the enemy with small sporadic attacks to delay movement, disrupt attacks, or weaken morale without committing the main force to battle. Trench raiding. Small-scale nighttime surprise attacks on enemy trenches, mainly used in World War I. Raiders would creep up on sentries guarding a trench sector, kill them quietly, and throw grenades into dugouts where enemies slept. This was also used to capture equipment, gather intelligence, and seize documents. Returning raiders risked friendly fire, so password systems were used for identification. Swarming. Attacking a main target's defenses with multiple autonomous units to overwhelm them. This tactic is used in asymmetric warfare where one side has much less capacity or size. Irregular attacks from multiple positions confuse the enemy about the actual threat location and strength. Flying wedge. A body of units moves forward in a triangular formation. This was common in ancient times for melee combat, but is still used because it provides excellent situational awareness and visibility. Police riot squads often use this formation. Defeat in detail. Dividing your force into smaller parts forces the enemy to divide their forces as well. You then bring a large portion of your force to fight small enemy units in sequence, rather than fighting the bulk of enemy divisions all at once. This is most useful against a more numerous enemy. Air interdiction. Bombing strategic points that do not pose an immediate threat but change the course of war. Tactical air interdiction affects events rapidly by bombing supplies moving to the active battle area. Strategic air interdiction targets bridges and roads for long-term benefits. This differs from strategic bombing, which is unrelated to ground operations. Siege, surrounding an enemy city or fortress to block supplies and escaping troops. The goal is forcing surrender through starvation or launching a prepared assault once defenses are weakened. A contravallation is a line of fortifications around a besieged city. A circumvallation is a second line facing away from the enemy fort to protect against relief forces. Mouse-holing. Infantry units blast through walls to move between buildings rather than using open streets. Open streets provide insufficient cover and expose infantry to fire. This technique is essential in urban warfare where streets are kill zones. Air assault, using helicopters to insert infantry behind enemy lines to attack from the rear. This is the modern vertical version of envelopment tactics, allowing rapid insertion of forces into positions that would take hours or days to reach by ground movement. Tank desant. Infantry units ride on top of tanks and dismount to fight on foot only in the final assault phase. The infantry protects the tank against anti-tank weapons while using the tank for transportation and fire support. Shoot and scoot. Artillery fires at a target and immediately moves from the firing position to avoid counter-battery fire. Modern counter-battery radar can locate firing positions within seconds, making this tactic essential for artillery survival. Marching fire, a form of suppressive fire where walking infantry keeps firing to force the enemy behind cover. The goal is often getting close enough to engage in close combat while the enemy remains suppressed. Center peel, a retreat technique used when small infantry groups need to escape a larger enemy force, similar to bounding Overwatch but in reverse. The rear element provides covering fire while the front element withdraws, then rolls reverse. Defense in depth. This strategy delays rather than prevents an attacker's advance. It relies on attacks losing momentum over time or as they cover larger areas. Once attackers spread out to cover more ground, defenders counterattack against smaller separated units. Scorched Earth. Retreating forces destroy anything the enemy might use, including food sources, shelter, and transportation. Russia used this against Germany in World War II, supported by vast territory and harsh winter conditions that made the strategy sustainable. To see how modern military power is coordinated and controlled at the highest level of government, check out our breakdown. Every White House military role explained in detail.